The last decade has seen a surge of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender activism, similar to the gay rights movement in the late 1960s and early 1970s. What lessons have we learned as a society? Where are we today, and where are we heading? We discuss lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights today on The Professors.
From across the city and the 7 city colleges of Chicago, broadcasting from 63rd and Halsted at Kennedy King College, The Professors, taking the art of conversation to a higher degree.
Before we start our conversation, let's take a look at the student-produced video package on this subject.
My dad was a Catholic deacon, my mom was a Catholic lay minister, and my family was very Catholic. And there were no gay people in my family and no openly gay people at my school, but I was picked on because, I liked musicals and I was obviously gay.
This is a segment taken from the cutting-edge website It Gets Better Project. It was created as a way to reach lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender teens to tell them they are not alone and that life will get better. Today on The Professors, a discussion about LGBT rights.
Well, I think to paraphrase Dr. King, we're not where we are going to be, and we're not where we should be, but at least we're not where we were.
Brian Richardson is Director of Public Affairs for the Center on Halsted. Located in the Lakeview neighborhood, the center is dedicated to building and strengthening the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. About 1,000 people visit the center each day. Same-sex marriage is legal in 9 states. 9 other states have civil union laws, including Illinois. 4 other states have limited domestic partnership laws. In some states, same-sex couples are allowed to adopt children. And there are hate crime laws on the books. But Richardson says more needs to be done.
People are facing discrimination in the workplace, in schools, on the streets, and there's more that needs to be done, both by the law and through public education, to allow LGBT people to live open, full, productive lives.
One of the biggest issues facing the LGBT community is bullying.
Because LGBT young people are still going to schools where they don't feel safe, where they don't feel comfortable being themselves.
Richardson says that bullying and persecution can lead many young people to commit suicide. It's the type of situation the It Gets Better project was designed for.
If there are 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds out there watching this video, what I'd love you to take away from it really is that it gets better. However bad it is now, it gets better.
Richardson points out that the number of hate crimes go up during presidential election years because political leaders will often speak against the LGBT community while campaigning, which in effect condones persecution or bullying. And that's why he says the struggle for LGBT rights must continue.
Because our goal is to eventually allow any LGBT person, young, old, black, white, to walk down the street and to be able to be out and open and proud with no fear of discrimination and no fear of violence against them.
Reporting for The Professors on WYCC PBS Chicago, I'm Tamika Kanazi.
Joining us today are Professor Sidney Hart from Wilbur Wright College, Professor Jennifer Alexander from Daly College, Professor Joseph Mastari from Wilbur Wright College, and Brian Richardson from the Center on Halsted. Welcome. Now, as a disability scholar, I know that when we talk about people with different abilities and even different physical characteristics, there's a lot of issue that comes from the social norms and the bullying they experience. And of course, a big thing that was in the headline is that story about the young college student. But I know there's a lot of psychological, there's childhood development, there's community issues, and even the social norms that come in from anthropology and sociology. And so where do you think some of those issues come from that lead to that bullying?
Are you asking a historical question?
Well, historical, current, social?
I think that a lot of the bullying happens because people get their idea about what normal is, and then anytime you deviate from a norm as a society, we level sanctions against that. So I think actually one of our big struggles right now is to normalize gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people in relationships.
We all have differing abilities, and whether they are physical, whether they're within our preferences and tastes otherwise, it's just that we are succumbed to a sort of video image of this one lifestyle that we're supposed to have, and that seems to be a really strong impediment towards any kind of difference that are accepted.
Well, and actually, can I take you to task for a minute, Antonio?
Sure.
You're talking about likes and preferences and lifestyles, and I think that we need to be more careful about our language because, and Joe, I want you to back me up here, because, thank you, because I think that being gay and lesbian isn't a choice in the way that...
Oh, no, I'm just saying that when you see people depicted on TV, they always have certain choices and lifestyles and the stereotypes. And it's unfortunate because that reinforces things that are bad and that we really ought to examine and take a look at what is the prejudices that we have and not live inside those prejudices.
Right.
I certainly would agree with that. The difficulty is most people are not even aware of their prejudice. There's two different types of prejudice. There's one called explicit versus implicit. Explicit, you're aware of, you could retrieve it from your memory. And a lot of people, hey, I don't view this group in a bad way. I don't stigmatize. And then there's the implicit. This has been conditioned ever since we were little through associations and observation, media, what have you, family.
Like kids saying, oh, that's so gay,
Exactly.
to mean something negative.
They might be joking around, but the association's negative, and it becomes internalized. And it's these implicit prejudice or stereotypes, what have you, that tend to impact people without being aware. And I think that certainly contributes to this issue of bullying and being, differentially treated.
Like something maybe even as innocuous as going to the toy store and there's an aisle that everything is pink, and that's the aisle for the girls. And if there's a little boy that wants to go down that aisle, or the girl wants to go down the aisle with the trucks on it, all of a sudden she may be told, no, you shouldn't go on the truck aisle. The little boy says, no, you can't go on the pink aisle. And that in itself starts leading to these preconceived notions and ideas that get developed. And at the center, we see young people from all across the city come into the building to try to find a safe space because unfortunately in their schools, they're scared to go to class because of what their classmates may do or what their teachers may say or do. And in some cases, they're kicked out of their homes because they are different than what their parents or their cousins or their schoolmates want them to be.
And then there's, of course, that issue of empowerment. When we work with people with disabilities, we're trying to get them to understand that they do have power within them, both themselves and as a collective. And I know that within the work in the community, how do you help empower these people so they can begin to see a light at the end of the tunnel, like it's the website that's getting better?
Yeah, it's the hardest part, but I think one of the nice things with the advent of the internet especially is that it gives young people an opportunity to see people who are LGBT identified out, open, living successful lives, whether it is the people who are recording videos on YouTube or someone famous like Ellen DeGeneres who's speaking out about JCPenney on her TV show. These are the sort of filters and ideas that follow down to young people. Or when the president and Michelle Obama will say something positive about an LGBT person, or that there are gay people elected to Congress or city council. Like those are huge steps in the right direction that will hopefully help those young people not feel alone. The one thing I wanted to add about the suicides is that we've gotten a lot of media attention on them lately, but these suicides are nothing new. They've been going on for generations and for decades because of young people feeling left out. And now hopefully as the attention grows, young people will feel not as left out and realize that they do have places like the center to go, but then hopefully also that together we can build a whole society where there isn't one place where they can go, but they can be themselves everywhere.
Yeah, and we started a Gay Straight Alliance at Daly College because and you can open them in high schools as well. And what I learned from reading about it online is that a lot of the Gay Straight Alliances are highly populated by straight students wanting to support their friends and their fellow students, and that's the way it is at our school. At our school, we're about 80% straight, and and it's just showing you, look, you're welcome here, you're safe here, and that's one really nice way to get kids to feel more comfortable.
We just started at Wright College, the Prism Alliance, which is also our first. It's not our first, but it's our current active gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender alliance, and we too have a lot of straight people, and it seems like in high schools there's a lot of activism going on, at least in the cities, with the Day of Silence is coming up, where kids come to school and don't speak because they want to acknowledge the silence that their gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, queer folks live under. And I think it's real different in the city, though. we live in Chicago. There's the center, right? There's places to
Boys
go.
Town.
I
There's
think.
Mecca. This.
Yeah. Well, but there's Boys Town, but that also actually adds to the invisibility of lesbians, right? And
I'm in Andersonville, so
Yes,
not invisible.
but I'm not. And when my son's friends say, "Oh, that's so gay," I have to say things like, "That's not gay. This is gay," right? This is what gay looks like. It's not those negative things. So if we don't continue to work towards watching how popular culture creates us, then we're allowing somebody outside of our community to create who we are. And I think that talks to the stereotypes
Right.
you were talking about, Antonio. Not every gay man is effeminate, and lots of heterosexual men are. Not every lesbian is butch, and lots of heterosexual women are. And we've got to really open it up so that those images aren't the only images. It's fine if they're there. It's just not fine if they're the only images of us.
And I'm talking about those images. We're in election year, and usually always in election year we get this entire agenda of topics brought out: gay marriage, gays in the military, all these things that are sort of brought to the attention of the public to use as divisive issues in terms of how does the community handle that? And then, at some point it's just got to be terrible to see this brought out again and again, only those issues, while there are other issues that are so much more important to be addressed.
Well, I'm talking a lot, but I think gay marriage is one of those really, really difficult things, because you have people who have religious convictions, assuming that they can talk to people who don't share those religious convictions. But marriage actually is civil, right? Any church, even in states where there is legal gay marriage, churches can refuse to marry whoever
That is
they
correct.
want. Marriage is civil, so it actually has nothing to do. Gay and lesbian marriage has nothing to do with religion, because it's a civil contract. And as a civil contract, it comes with a lot of really critical benefits, like if you are a non-biological parent to a child, if you're married to that child, custody is not an issue. If you're married to the parent of that child, custody is not an issue. Here we have to have second parent adoption laws to ensure maintenance of custody. Jennifer, you were talking when we were talking earlier, inheritance, estates, end of life
End of
issues.
life, being able to make decisions about end of life situations within a hospital setting, that all of a sudden this person who you've been with for 37 years no longer has that say if they're not married. And also estate planning and passing things down along. I had I've been in several situations and known people quite well who had that come up when somebody was getting towards the end of their life, and it was tremendously painful, and there was nothing that we could do about it because they can't get legally married.
You can't go into the ICU, and you can't put your partner on your benefits, even though in Chicago you can, but it's not equal.
No, and it's also too symbolically as well. Even if civil unions were equal, and they're not, certainly at the federal level as well, it's still symbolically. Survey studies show, ask the same questions, use the word marriage, the support drastically drops. It's almost like civil union, it's like almost like a patronizing, okay. But you use the word marriage, that means we're equal. And I think without the label marriage, this continues a prejudice, at least at perhaps at a level we're not even aware of, like the implicit versus civil union. I think civil union is a great stepping stone, but it just symbolically, it's not equal.
Not even
It's
close.
not the same connotation.
And I know that it impacts other things also too, housing outside of that beyond marriage. And I know we were talking earlier about somebody who was fired at a college because they were gay, and this was a long time ago, but still it just shows the impact that it has on your lifetime. And it is just unfair in terms, we have the whole idea of the ADA to allow equal access for people that are somewhat different physically, but you always have that debate, and I know we talked about the research and things like that in terms of there's always this, and I mentioned this idea of choice in terms of the stereotypes, but you have people depicting this as a choice and others saying, no, this is biological based, and we always have that disagreement out there. And
Well, but what we know,
that's why I'm bringing it up. I'd
right,
like
what
to
we really
clear that
know
up for our
is that
listeners.
cross-cultural research shows that many, many, many human cultures, you find people with same-sex attractions across cultures. It's not an American thing. It's not a white middle class thing. In fact, one of the things we were talking about earlier was, in fact, the gay rights movement wasn't started by white folks. It was started by Puerto Rican drag queens.
Right.
Right. So
And young homeless people.
And young, yeah,
Like the
and
Stonewall riots.
yeah, and butch lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
Got to make sure the women, because we're so often invisible,
Yeah.
not in the community, but outside of the community. I lost track.
Well, you were referring to the nature-nurture type of. In addition to your speaking too, it's actually homosexual behavior, homoerotic, is found throughout the animal kingdom. So it's one of my favorite arguments. Well, if it was natural, then it goes against reproduction. No, monkeys, dolphins, animals. Yeah,
And gay and lesbian people can reproduce.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
sexuality is not all about reproduction.
Right, sexuality isn't all about reproduction, and gay and
there's
lesbian
other-
people can
there's
reproduce.
other motives,
It's not that difficult.
And it's a very difficult question, the nature-nurture, because a lot of it all depends on how you're defining your terms operationally. And if you have a bias against gay, lesbian, what have you, your definition is going to, favor probably environmental-based. And unfortunately, we know that there are people out there teaching that at the college level.
Right.
And with that the environment can facilitate one way or the other, and then it's a choice. We just came across that not too long ago.
Right.
I'm purposely being nebulous because I don't want to mention any names, but it's still out. Very prevalent.
Right, and then you
this
can counter
idea.
that with the research where they go in and they do the PET imaging of the brain, and then they'll show that the same response that you see from a woman shows up in a male when looking at a particular image. And so there you've got the one side, and of course the group will, from their own perspective, eliminate that as a possible explanation.
Oh, sure. Just change your terms. And
Adrienne Rich, who is a poet who just died this week at 82, she was a really important feminist poet, wrote an article way back, 70s, 80s, called Compulsory Heterosexuality and the Lesbian Continuum. And in this article, one of the things she argues is that we cannot solve the nature-nurture debate until we remove the privilege that heterosexuality provides, especially for women. And remember, this is 30, 40 years ago now, but especially for women, especially because heterosexuality provides economic privileges because of access to men's higher salaries, but also social privileges. The assumption is heterosexual before anything else, and then you have to say, wait, stop that assumption. And so in some ways, she argues, heterosexuality is compulsory unless we struggle against it. And it was written a long time ago, but I still think it's very, very much true.
And I think that gets back to the earlier question about elections and what the impact of the election is on the community as well too. It's tough, as any minority group may attest to, when your rights are put up to popular vote, or that your lifestyle or your family all of a sudden is a debate point in a Republican presidential debate or a general presidential debate. And that's an ongoing challenge too, but then we recognize as a community that we have to move through this. We have to change the structure and the norms to where it's no longer a question of, do LGBT people exist? Is it real? I think that question has been answered. No one's talking about that, whereas 20, 30 years ago, people were questioning the entire assumption of LGBT people. But today, questions and states, North Carolina is having an election in May, I believe, to put an amendment in their constitution discriminating against lesbian and gay couples. Again, like this happens consistently. That's a hard pill to swallow, and it's hard every election season to get out and to campaign for your own personal freedoms and your own personal rights, what should be civil rights and civil liberties that the majority of the population already has.
Well, and I want to say, too, that I think it's offensive that anything regarding civil rights would be put to a popular vote. I mean, so it's not a matter of majority vote. It's offensive. We didn't get the civil rights laws that we have from a popular vote. We never would have. It never would have happened. But I also want to say on the plus side that what I think is really nice now is that younger people now, I find, are more and more and more open. They don't care. They don't judge. Not all across the nation, but more and more. You have a more tolerant, and I think it's because we're all able to communicate more through things like social media and stuff. So Rick Santorum can get up and say whatever he wants to say, but I can too, and I can share that, and you can share it, and you can share it. It's like the It Gets Better videos that he doesn't have a bully pulpit anymore. Nobody does. We can all share our opinions about things, and that we are able to talk about these things now. That you can talk about these things in school more than, at least when I was growing up, this was never discussed in school. So,
but I think it depends on the school. It's still sexual orientation, still the #1 form of harassment across the country in high schools, particularly middle school and in ninth grade. So it's baby steps.
Yeah.
It's
getting
still a
better.
huge
It's
problem.
getting
Like you
Yeah.
had said
It's
in
not
the
gotten
clip
better
at the beginning,
Real
we're
baby
not
steps.
We're
there
not where
yet.
we need to be yet.
No.
And we're still talking about gays and lesbians and bisexual and transgendered people as a problem. And W.E.B. Du Bois back in 18-something said, you know, people want to ask me, what is it like to be a problem? And he's not the problem.
Right.
The problem are those who
that
discriminate against.
The environment created by the
Right, and
norms.
W.B. Du Bois was the first African American to graduate with a sociology PhD from Harvard. He's not the problem. We're not the problem. The problem is discrimination.
Yeah.
Now, Jennifer, I know you mentioned how you had been part of a team putting together a float out there in the parade. So could you describe how inviting that atmosphere was for you?
Yeah, so the City Colleges of Chicago had never been in the Pride Parade that happens every June. We are in the Bud Billiken Parade. We are in the Irish, whatever that is, St. Patrick's Day Parade. We're in the Puerto Rican Day Parade. We've never been in the Pride Parade. And so a student, wonderful student, and myself worked on it, and we got full support from the chancellor, and we got staff, faculty, and students from all 7 colleges to be on the float and walk with us, walk alongside, or else be on the float. So it was a tremendous outpouring of support, considering that we only had about 2 weeks to plan it. So it was wonderful. So hopefully we'll just be in it forever and ever after that.
I hope so. It was a fun day.
Well, that's fantastic, and I love that. Last year, I think there were 700,000 people at the Pride Parade in the city, second largest parade in the city, and one of the most festive. But then it's an ongoing challenge too, like you were talking about. Like, yes, there are safe schools, there are safe communities and neighborhoods, Andersonville or Boys Town, but all of that happens in a small radius on the north side.
Yes.
You know, there's still so many places on the west side, on the south side, in the suburbs, and in northwest Indiana, and throughout downstate as well too, where it's not an open environment, it's not inclusive, and it's not welcoming, and so there needs to be more done
Absolutely.
throughout, you know.
Yeah, when he was talking about an open environment, I remember one of the things that I saw once on a documentary I had to deal with, how once you had the men go off to war, women assumed this new role. We had Rosie the Riveter in a portrayal of women in a completely new light that may have opened some doors that hadn't been opened before that at the time. And I mean, what do you see out there in terms of media that people have now where that's portrayed in a much more positive sense? Oh yeah, at least something like shows.
You know, there are some, I don't know the names of the shows that my kid watches, and I don't have cable, although I've heard of The Elder. Still
It's
waiting
almost
to
a
see
requirement nowadays, it seems like, on the sitcoms that there has to be
the gay best friend.
Right, and
But
that's
a stereotype.
right, and that's just
That's
that's
the
what I wanted
problem.
your
That's
opinion.
And it's token just like you got the one black friend
Right,
who will
right.
die first in every action movie, right?
Yes.
You didn't know that? Yeah,
No.
the black guy dies first in every action movie. Watch it, you'll see it.
Watch
on
old Star
City
Trek.
But it's less invisible than it was.
Right.
You know, like it's
Because the
it's
wacky
start.
gay friend is not a bad person.
Right.
But it still limits our ability to be who we are, because if you can only be the wacky gay friend or straight queer eye for the straight guy,
Right.
if that's your only option, then it still is continuing to limit us. You know, in at least gay men's communities, there are as many hyper masculine subcultures as there are effeminate subcultures, and you know, we need to make this story a broader story. This is about your next door neighbor. This is about the teacher who's teaching your kids, and they're not doing anything bad to your kids. That's mostly straight men, right? They're just being who they are. We need to make it as broad and open so that we normalize being gay and lesbian. And then the next hurdle, and you had mentioned this earlier before the cameras, the next hurdle is also making it open for transgendered people
Right.
who probably suffer much more
Right.
in terms of stereotypes and in terms of
Well,
limited
even just the
opportunities.
data, domestic violence happens in same-sex partnerships at the same rate that it does in heterosexual partnerships, which is a problem, that there's domestic violence happening at all.
Huge.
But within transgender relationships, I don't know the exact statistics, but it's something like tenfold, because transgender people are often the most susceptible to crimes of that nature, other crimes in general too, because they are invisible within the straight community, but then also very invisible within the LGBT community. It's unfortunate to say, but there's no mistake that the fact that T comes at the end of the acronym.
And we lesbians had to fight to get L at the beginning.
Yep. Yeah. And at the center, we see young people from across the city coming in, many of whom are homeless. Right now, there's 15,000 homeless youth in the city of Chicago. Tonight, there'll be 15,000 people without a place to go home to. Most data indicates that about a third are LGBT identified, and large percentages of those groups are also trans-identified youth, who are just having a tough time being themselves and finding a safe space to go to, because they may not have a place to sleep at night, they may not have a school that they can go to or a home they can go home to, and so many challenges that we as an LGBT community, but then we larger as the city of Chicago, need to pay attention to.
Well, as we getting close to the end of our show, we've got to sit down and come out with a message we'd like to get across to everyone, and to at least take it part from this show to think about what they can do within their lives, within their community, within their families, to be more accepting and more open. And like they have some experts out there in terms of having gone through the experiences yourselves. Share a little bit about that.
For me, and what I tell straight friends when they ask me this question is just start talking about it. Because the invisibility factor is so difficult. But if you're at the water cooler at the office and Don't Ask, Don't Tell has just been repealed, mention it and say, you know what, I think it's good that gay and lesbians can serve openly in the military. Maybe one day trans people can. If some candidate says something foolish about how gay families shouldn't exist or gay people can't adopt, say, you know what, I disagree with that. Like, make it public, talk about your opinions, because I do believe the vast majority of people, and most data is showing that this is proven as well too, as more elections move in our direction, support LGBT rights and the community, but may not be speaking up about it. So the more people speak up about it, the more straight allies we have, then the easier it is for us to speak up sometimes too.
Well, thank you, Brian. And Jennifer, do you have a parting thought for everyone?
I think that what I would most want to say is that for somebody who is straight, I wonder if you feel really strongly that people shouldn't be able to get married or self-identify as gay or have those rights, that you need to search inside of yourself and look and see why you're so bothered by this, and why you would want other people to not have the same rights that you can have. What is that within yourself? Because they're not bothering you, they're not hurting you, and I think that that'll help to end some discrimination as well. So.
And Joe, do you have an idea? You want to share?
I like what both of them said. So I'm going to follow on what they were saying, being outspoken. And when you do that, also too, I think it creates some dissonance in other people. They will begin to challenge their own thoughts and attitudes, especially if you already have a good relationship with that person. They're going to have to. They're going to have to do something with that inconsistency.
The cognitive
the cognitive inconsistency. So they're going to, and I think that's the start.
Thank you, Joe. And
Certainly.
Sydney,
Being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender doesn't hurt, shouldn't hurt. Discrimination hurts. Come on, let's just stop it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on The Professors.
Thank you.